Hello and welcome back to Rest Podcast. In today's podcast episode, I'll be talking about toxic people. 10 toxic people you should avoid at all costs. Toxic people defy logic. Some are blissfully unaware of the negative impact that they have on those around them. And others seem to derive satisfaction from creating chaos and pushing other people's buttons. As important as it is to learn how to deal with different kinds of people, truly toxic people will never be worth your time or energy, as they take a lot of each. Toxic people create unnecessary complexity, strife, and worst of all, stress. People inspire you or they drain you, so you must pick them wisely. And for toxic people, you must stay away from them. Recent research from a university in Germany shows just how serious toxic people are. They found that exposure to stimuli can cause strong negative emotions, the same kind of exposure that you get when you deal with a toxic person. Whether it's negativity, cruelty, the victim syndrome, or just plain craziness, toxic people drive your brain into a stressed out state that should be avoided at all costs. Studies have long shown that stress can have a lasting negative impact on the brain. Exposure to even a few days of stress compromises the effectiveness of the neurons in the hippocampus, an important brain area responsible for reasoning and memory. Weeks of stress can reversibly damage the brain cells, and months of stress can permanently destroy them. Toxic people don't just make you miserable, they are really hard on your brain. The ability to manage your emotions and remain calm under pressure has a direct link to your performance. But to avoid toxic people, you need to know who they are. So, who are toxic people? Toxic simply means able to cause harm or harmful. And so, people who are toxic can harm you in several different ways. You can't hope to distance yourself from toxic people until you first know who they are. The trick is to separate those who are annoying or simply difficult from those who are toxic, truly toxic. What follows are 10 types of toxic drainers that you should stay away from at all costs so you don't become one yourself. The first class of people who are toxic are the gossips. I'm sure you must have heard the Eleanor Roosevelt quote: "Great minds discuss ideas, average ones discuss events, and small minds discuss people." Gossips derive pleasure from other people's misfortunes. It might be fun to peer into someone's life or the personal dealings or professional failings, but over time it gets tiring, makes you feel gross, and hurts other people. There are too many positives out there and too much to learn from interesting people to waste your time talking about the misfortunes of others. The next class of people you should avoid are the temperamental people. Some people have absolutely no control over their emotions. They will lash out at every least thing that happens to them. And not just that, temperamental people love to dump their emotions on you. Temperamental people are tough to dump from your life because of their lack of self-control over their emotions. It makes you feel bad for them. And not just bad for them, it makes you feel guilty for dumping them. When push comes to shove, temperamental people will use you as the emotional toilet and should be avoided at all costs. The next people or toxic class of people you should avoid are the victims. The victims are tough to identify because you initially sympathize or empathize with their problems, But as time passes, you begin to realize that their time of need is all the time. Victims actively push away any personal responsibility by making every speed bump an uncrossable mountain. They don't see tough times as opportunities to learn and grow from. Instead, they see them as an out. There's an old saying, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. This perfectly captures the toxic person, the victim, who chooses to suffer every time. The next class of toxic people is the self absorbed people. This class of people are those that bring you down at every least thing that happens or every least encounter they have with you. How do you know them? You know them by the first five sentences they make to you. They always sound like I've got, I do. It's always I. It's always about them. When you meet such people, always remember that even though they hang around you for a whole lifetime, they are of no good because they'll be of no benefit to you. They would only use you to build their self-esteem. They are the self-absorbed people and they can be very, very toxic. Here's the point. On a normal day, you may not find an issue with someone who is self-absorbed, but the fact is that if you're experiencing a bad time, they could make you feel even worse by talking about themselves and their achievements instead of focusing on your pain at the moment since they don't feel the same pain. So they would never empathize with you. They would never. They would always rub it in by highlighting their flawlessness, their perfection, how they could have handled it better. You see, and making you feel even worse. So they're the self-absorbed people. They are very toxic to be around. The next category of toxic people you should avoid are the envious people. And how do you know when someone is envious? You know simply when they are never satisfied with what they get and always measure their success against the world. The fact is, if you move along life, you find people who are better than you and who are less than you. And so that's the way life is. So, but the fact that it's never enough for you because there's someone who's better than you, it could be a sign that you're envious of them. And so if you're around an envious person, you better run away because they'll cause you to trivialize your own accomplishments. And that's the reason they are toxic. Then our next class of people who are toxic are the manipulators. Have you ever been manipulated before? It's like the puppet show, someone is backstage doing their thing and you're moving towards what they're doing. It's very annoying to understand that you're being manipulated. But a lot of friends we have today are manipulators and they are toxic. Here is why. The manipulator comes into your life, who knows everything about you, cares for you, makes you laugh, and you very much admire them. You feel that they are concerned people, you feel they like you feel, that they're nice to you, but they have an aim. The grand aim of their friendship or closeness to you is so they can make you do what they want you to do. They would enter into your life and suck out everything, all the information that you have, and then use it against you. Or not necessarily against you, but make you do what they want to do, even when they know that you wouldn't do what they want you to do. That's a manipulator for you. And they can be very toxic. In our next class of people, we have the dementors. The dementors are people, very toxic people. But what they do is, because they have accrued a lot of evil over time within them by the ways of thinking and their actions and all that. When they come into a room, they tend to suck out all the life from the room with their negative thinking. And it's not just that they think negatively, they try to project that upon you so you can accept what they think and how they think. And even though they know that they feel badly from how they think, they want you to think the same and feel as bad as they do. If you have a dementor for a friend, please run away. That is simple because they would never let you see the good in everything. The cup is always half empty to them. And they will have 999 reasons to justify why the cup should be seen as half empty. They are dementors. Run away. In the next category of toxic people today, we'll talk about the twisted people. These people are very toxic, the judgmental people. What they do is they never let you see the good side of anything. Or when they come to you and you tell them about experience, all they do is tell you what you did wrong. They never say what you did right. And they always say this phrase, to be honest. Once you hear that, be very skeptical because these people do not even want to hear from you. They always want to point out how wrong you are. Sometimes these people derive joy for pleasure, from making you feel tainted or not good enough or always wrong. But watch out for them. They're the judgmental people and they are toxic. The next category of people you must avoid are the arrogant people. These people are a total waste of time, I can tell you. What they do is they parade themselves as, prideful about the things they've done, the achievements, everything seems like a challenge. And then you suddenly hope in them. You believe that, oh yeah, he will stand up for me. He's there for me. He's done it before. He's got experience. Meanwhile, some people are empty, very empty. They are arrogant. And how do you know them? You know them because first of all, they always have something to say about themselves that puts them in favor of something. They claim abilities so easily, but inside they are empty. Some leaders are like this. If you've ever been led by, someone in the team, you would know what I mean. They're like this, I've done, I have, but deep down they have nothing and they have done nothing. Now you know the different classes of toxic people. When you know them, how do you protect yourself from them? The first way to protect yourself against toxic people is by asking yourself the full question, am I toxic myself? Because here's the problem. Most times we are guilty of the blames we put on other people. So if you can actually come out with this question and truly evaluate your emotions and your acts, find out if you're really toxic. And if you're not, then it's a good thing. You can start from there. Toxic people drive you crazy because their behavior is so irrational. And make no mistake about it, their behavior truly goes against reason. So why do you allow yourself respond to them emotionally and get sucked into the mix? The more irrational and off base someone is, the easier it should be for you to remove yourself from their traps. Quit trying to beat them at their own game. Distance yourself from them, both physically and emotionally. The fact is, it's easy to distance yourself physically from someone, but emotionally may not be so easy because you can't really control their actions, but you can control how you react to their actions. If they push your buttons, you ignore them. It's like dealing with a mad person. You know that, oh, they're crazy. So whatever they say falls on deaf ears. However they act, doesn't matter because they're crazy. You see? So it's having this mindset around them. If you must be around them or deal with them, this is how you must deal with them, by ignoring them. Especially when they say things that, could get to you. Ignore them because they're crazy. And one thing you must not do is try to prove to them that they're crazy because they will never listen to you. That's the fact. They have been toxic for a very long time and you don't know how long. You don't know how deeply embedded that thing is in them. So try not to prove to them that they're toxic. Sometimes you want to say that, oh yeah, you know what you're doing. You stop what you're doing. But no, they know they are toxic sometimes and some don't even know. But quit trying to prove to them that they're toxic. Just ignore them and distance yourself from them if you can. That's the best way to get away from toxic people. Most people feel as though because they have to work or live with someone, they have no way to control the chaos that those people produce. This couldn't be further from the truth. Once you've identified a toxic person, you will begin to find their behavior more predictable and easier to understand. This will equip you to think rationally about when and where you have to put up with, where you don't. So the fact is, to some extent, you have a choice. This will equip you with how to deal with them to begin with. If you let things happen naturally, you're bound to find yourself constantly embroiled in difficult conversations. If you set boundaries and decide when and where you'll engage a difficult person, you can control much of the chaos. The only trick is to stick with your guns and keep your boundaries in place when they try to cross them, which they will. In as much as I can say that these steps we discussed right now are very important to dealing with a toxic person, I know that they may not work because the person might be too toxic or in a different degree that we've discussed. So for those people, I would say you probably need to talk to someone else so they can suggest to you how to deal with them. Yes, but that's in the case where you cannot distance yourself emotionally or physically from them. Then discuss with someone to see if they can help you with ideas on how to deal with such people. And like I said earlier, anytime you're surrounded by people who are toxic, it's a good time for you to reflect on your life and ask yourself if you're also toxic, because most times you attract your like. And if they're toxic, it could mean that because you're also toxic, so you people have ganged together or are ganging together against the world to, be toxic. So it's probably your fault that you have toxic friends. I'm not saying it's always your fault, but I'm saying that it's possible that it's your fault. So it's a time for you to at least evaluate yourself and your character to see if you're actually toxic. And if you are, then you should probably work on yourself first of all before you cut them off. Because if you don't change, even when they are gone, you stay toxic and feel uncomfortable when you realize it. And just now thinking about it, there is also something you can do to help someone who's toxic. And it's not just about yourself, because you must realize that the reason people are toxic is because sometimes they lack something. They haven't learned something. They don't even know they're toxic. So sometimes, even if you really want to help them, then you can go ahead to help them. But it's risky because uh, there's a possibility that they wouldn't realize it and they would take offense at your trying to help them. But if you must help them, then there's a way of going around about it. Some way is by appealing to them or people who know them that their line of behavior doesn't appeal to you. That's a possible way of trying to get yourself roped out of it. And so if they must continue dealing with you, they must act alright or act right by you, else you're off. You can state this as the terms of your relationship with them and see if they change. Because I wouldn't say sit still and watch someone be toxic to you. I mean, if you must deal with them, then you must actually have a shield or method to dealing with them. Like I said, think they're crazy. But if you must think they're sane, let's say they're your boss, right? And almost every day you see them, then maybe, if possible, if there are chances, or any chance for you to address it by speaking to someone who knows them about it, or probably reporting them to a higher authority, that can help them put them in check. Without which, I think it could be a dead end. And all you have to do is to save yourself from all the anger and the pain that it could actually cause to you. And then here is one part that no one wants to acknowledge. What if you ask yourself the relevant question, the question, am I toxic? And the answer is yes. If you're that honest to have that answer because it's true, then it's time you worked on your behavior. Now, this is very rare because a man's ways are right in his own eyes, but it's possible that you could be toxic. And when you find out that you're toxic, what do you do about it? One way to help yourself when you notice that you're toxic or you have a toxic behavior, is by speaking to someone who you believe cares for you or cares about your well being, more emotional well being. When you speak to them, maybe they can have ideas on how you can stop being toxic or a few steps that you can take to avoid being toxic. But if you don't have anyone around you, or even if you do, I believe they would suggest something in the lines of trying to be concerned about what you say and how you act about people. Now, most of us don't really give heed to how we act around people. We just say what we want to say, and we just say, you know what, I felt it and I said it. I mean, you cannot just keep saying and doing things. You have to cater to people in a way that you love them to do to you. So if you just speak at random without thinking, then imagine if everyone spoke the same way, and to you for that matter. That would be very hurting. So to avoid that, it's always good to think about how people perceive the way you act. Now I know that the world has become very twisted in a way that sometimes you act right, but people just think it's wrong because you don't act like them. That's different. I'm talking about when you realize that you are toxic. One thing you can do is to think about what you do. Think about how it affects other people. Maybe that can be your starting point. And if possible, you can actually set boundaries for yourself. For instance, if you realize that you have triggers, environmental triggers, that make you act in those toxic ways, what you can do is the moment that trigger is on, try as much as possible to realize it so you can actually desist from acting the way you would have acted. Even if it means separating yourself from the environment, do that. That can help you a lot. That's one step to avoid being toxic to other people. And sometimes when you're toxic to other people and you realize it, you can actually stay away from them. You can do that. If maybe that makes you feel in ways that trigger you, then it's worthwhile taking yourself physically away from where they are. That can help you manage your toxic behavior. Of course, you can't always keep on doing that. So what you might do is separate yourself from them for a bit until you find yourself able to handle being in their presence. That can be one way to help you from being toxic towards people. Another way you can actually do this and work on your toxic behavior is by also establishing some emotional boundaries. Now, people, I believe, are different, and so they could get toxic or act toxic towards you because they're exposed to some feelings. This could be memories, this could be anything at all. So, also distance yourself emotionally from those feelings so you can avoid being toxic towards people. Another way is to regulate your thoughts and actions. By regulate here, it's not just about evaluating what you're about to say, because we said that earlier, right? When you say things, think about how others feel about what you say or could feel about what you say. This is now into the realms of limiting what you say and how ways that you act. Just limit them completely. The thing is, when you put yourself in a position to always act at every single thing, you could fall into the trap of becoming toxic because no one speaks all the time and speaks sense. When you speak all the time, you're more likely to hurt people because the brain doesn't work that way to react every single time. So if your reaction every single time is speech, then perhaps cut down your speech and then see if it helps you. Because I've found that people are sometimes under pressure to react. They want to speak about everything. They hear a comment, they want to react to it because they feel like they have the right to speak. Yes, you have the right to speak, but you must not always speak. So that is one way to help you from being toxic towards others. And then remember that just the way it's draining dealing with someone who's toxic, it's also draining being toxic Because being toxic is not being real. Being toxic is being abnormal, is being false. Because initially you hadn't that mindset. Something changed along the way that changed you, that changed the way you started to react and become toxic towards people. So it's not being real in the first place, and it can be tiring being toxic. So one way you can actually stay away from being toxic is by adopting healthy coping skills. Now, one of them, like we said, is establishing boundaries with people who make you become toxic or act toxic, or triggers around an environment that make you become toxic. But this way is when you feel that urge to become toxic or to speak toxic, to act toxic, you can actually do something else that suits you, that makes you happy. And I must say that a lot of times when you say things that make you happy, people say it could be anything. No, at this point, I mean something, of course, legal and ethical that keeps you happy. Not drugs, no. Things that are healthy and legal and ethical that keep you happy. You can actually adopt them when you feel this urge to be toxic or your toxic self. It can help you protect people around you because they are the ones who probably suffer the most, and their suffering is unfair because you are the problem, and you could have dealt with this. For some people, they are toxic because of their jobs, the environment, who they deal with on a daily basis. If you fall into that category of people, then maybe it's time to make a change. I know it sounds mediocre, it sounds unserious, it sounds like not feasible in the real life scenario. But the fact is, you can quit your job to avoid feeling or being toxic. And when it comes to that, you may have to, because eventually it will affect your psyche. And that will live with you for almost a lifetime. I mean, think about it. If you don't change, you'll be with your mind for a lifetime, right? And it will keep on, causing you to feel unhealthy, feel sick, feel depressed, because it's on you, it's in you, it's with you. So the best thing is to separate yourself from that job that makes you feel toxic, if you can. And mind you, I'm not just saying quit your job and become homeless. I'm not saying that. I know that jobs have value. It's probably paying you your bills and all that. But I'm saying that if it's the only way, and you've weighed it carefully to understand that it's taking a toll on you, a toll that is causing you to risk your health and your well-being, then maybe it's worth looking for another job. A job that guarantees a safe working environment where you wouldn't feel toxic and act that way towards people. Dare I say that nowadays it's easy to find people who are toxic. And it's not because things have changed, it's because people are now filled with expectations, self-created, self-set targets, which are most times unrealistic. So much so that because they're unrealistic, they don't meet them. They don't meet them, and then they feel like failures. But no one wants to feel like a failure outside their home. So they come outside, and all they do is try to make people feel smaller than they are so they can feel bigger. You see? So that's one way people actually rope themselves into being toxic, is because they feel like failures. You see, and I don't know why people feel that way, because there is no other standard than yourself to judge with. I mean, you're running your own race and it's all unique to everybody. So why do you think that you're a failure? Don't get me wrong, that word does exist, failure. It does exist, but it's up to you to define it. If you think that it means that you're failed, if you failed in your business, it means that you're a failure. If you define it that way, so be it for you. But if you think that, it's a learning curve, then for you, failure is defined as a learning curve. So that's the way life is. So if you're roped into this into this vicious cycle of expectations, right, from society, from parents, family members, and all that. Rope yourself out, because the fact is they don't know the monster they are creating from those expectations. And it's not up to them, it's up to you to realize that these are realistic or these are unrealistic, and work with what's realistic. And sometimes, like as I say, life happens. I mean, it's sometimes used carelessly. But the thing is that if you do not meet up with an expectation, it doesn't mean that you have failed. Sometimes some inevitable things happened and change the course of your life and your goals. And and it doesn't mean that you have failed. It just means that you're in another stage that is yet to be, maybe it's not the same as the same stage, but you're probably on the way to achieving your goal. You're still on the way. It should be gratifying to know that you're still on track to achieve your goal, and not see yourself as I failed because it was meant to be in a year's time and it's already 2 years and I'm not still there. You see? And most times people don't realize this until they they begin to maybe they're old and they're about to die. They feel like, oh, they never took time to appreciate the moment. The moment. It was all about the goal, achieving, and all that. Some people call it the curse of the millennials, of our generation, but I don't know if it really is just for millennials. I think it's for a lot of people. Even the baby boomers sound this way sometimes, because they are living in an age where it's all about achievement, the show off, you see, and people are dragged deep into this race and battle for who is better, who is stronger, who's more wealthy, who's richer and all that. And it's just an endless battle, and it doesn't make any sense, because there's always someone out there who can outdo you. But one thing is better is when you outdo yourself. So it doesn't really matter what they do or how they do. It matters what you do. So if you become toxic because or you cannot measure up to the achievements of your friends or your colleagues, then maybe you should have a rethink, because you're on your own race. Sometimes I find it interesting because you love yourself the most, but you let your feelings be run by others. It just questions if you love yourself at all. Because if you do, then maybe you should always focus on you. At least you start with you and be concerned about you. Be truthful to you and grow you always. For all who have listened so far, I want to thank you, because the tips I've shared in this video are tips that I have actually worked out myself on dealing with toxic people and how you can actually recover from being toxic. I wouldn't say I was once toxic, but I've always watched out for all these things to make sure that I am doing a careful evaluation of myself, asking myself the question, am I toxic? And so, I mean, if you have been in my shoes before, or if you're in my shoes, or if you love to ask yourself these questions, I think you should, because it could be the beginning of a groundbreaking change for you and the lives of people around you. Because you cannot imagine how much influence you have on some people until you change your behavior. Just try that and tell me what you see. So if you have more tips on how to spot one who's toxic or change from being toxic, then maybe you should comment down below to help others who are or who have watched this video or who are watching this video. And also always strive to improve your life. On this channel, I'm trying to make it more about life improvement and all that, because I strive to improve my life every day. And I know that the steps I take are sometimes mundane, but they are steps, they are fundamental steps that will count any day. I want to encourage you to take such steps to improve your life. It's not just about acquiring information, it's about putting it into action. And I'm actually for action. It's not about how much you know, but how much you do based on what you know. So And I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing and do things right. And thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with family and friends so we can actually grow this channel to become an even bigger channel. Thank you very much for listening, and I shall see you in my next video. For now, it's a wrap. Bye now. Hello and welcome back to my Rest podcast. In the first episode of this podcast, I talked about how to spot a toxic person and also how to ask yourself the relevant question to find out if you're toxic yourself, because sometimes it could be the way your perception to life is the reason why you think others are toxic towards you. And I thank you if you have done that. In this episode, which is the second episode of the video, I would like to talk about how to recover from a toxic relationship. Few things feel as freeing as leaving a truly toxic relationship. It's such a relief to escape the constant criticism, continual conflict, and emotional manipulation. But what if you discover that you've taken the poison with you? Is there a possibility of recovery? Which is why I'm making this podcast, or this episode rather, to talk about how you can recover from a toxic relationship. Unfortunately, the pains of the relationship oftentimes last longer than the relationship. You keep on hearing this disgusting voice in your head, or the feelings just keep running through after the relationship has ended. So that's why I've made this podcast, so we can talk about how you can recover from a toxic relationship. First of all, you must be patient with yourself. Most times, recovery isn't automatic. In other words, the relationship has ended, but you're still hurting. It's normal because that relationship created a pattern within you that you have to break, and it takes time to break such patterns. That's the fact. For some weeks, for some months, and for some it's going to be years. But the most important thing is that you're working towards breaking that pattern. That you first realized it and you're working towards breaking it. And that's what healing is all about. Healing always takes time. So if you become impatient with yourself, all you do is reinforce that voice in your head, that toxic voice in your head, and eventually it won't result in proper healing. And sometimes we want to brag about how we recovered from something so quickly because we want people to think it's record time, whatever that means. But the fact is, who cares about how long it takes you? The question is, do you actually recover from it? It's the lie we tell ourselves sometimes, that we are faster than other people. Meanwhile, we don't get the stuff. We don't get the material of the essence of the moment. So if you're recovering from a toxic relationship, allow yourself some time. No matter how long it takes, always remember that you are healing, and do everything that you should in this time while you're healing to ensure that you heal from it. That said, you must also realize that when healing takes too long, it might be because you're not going about it the right way. Sometimes we say we're healing from something, but day in, day out, we still find ourselves dwelling on those things. We still find ourselves mingling with those people who caused us those experiences. I think it's counterproductive. You have to remove yourself from the vicinity, the environment that has hurt you, has put you in that toxic state, because you need to recover now. If you don't do this, your recovery could take forever, because it's like renewing a wound and hoping that it heals. So the time we talk about here is the time to heal time during which you must be outside and not in contact with the toxic individual or the relationship, which is very important and primary for healing to commence. So, even though healing takes time, healing should not take forever. That's the point that I'm stressing. The next step in the healing process from a toxic relationship is watching the way you speak to yourself. Self talk in this process is very important. Now, self talk here, it detracts from what people think is, regular self talk, like motivating yourself out of a situation. It's not about that now. Now you're healing. You have to you have to come to terms with the fact that you have been hurt. And also you should be able to explain to yourself how you feel. Because sometimes while we're healing, all we hear are the voices in our head, the voices that were introduced by the abuser or the individual who was toxic towards us. That's what we hear in our heads. And so these voices keep on ruling our minds for a long time, even while we're healing. And so how we talk to ourselves, we should speak in the voice in keeping with healing, and not a voice that is answering the questions of the abuser or the toxic individual. Sometimes it's useful to write these on paper, the ways that we feel, so that we can actually address them and see how we are healing from them. It's a way of monitoring our healing, because we're healing, but are we actually healing? Because if it takes you a whole month to heal from something that would usually take, I'm saying usually now take because of how it feels to you, it's actually very, very simple to you, but it takes you too long to heal from it. It might be because you have not actually assessed the exact way you felt about the abuser or the toxic relationship. That's the reason why it's taking you too long. So even if it means writing down on a piece of paper, you should do that. Writing the ways you feel and then being able to grow from there, to grow from it. It can be very, very powerful for those who have adopted that writing of the ways that we feel. I know you're thinking at this point, oh, how can I write something that I already know? I'm the one who feels it. So, sorry, I feel it. So I should be able to assess my thoughts and my feelings. Yes, that's true. But you find that sometimes we think that we know something, but we can't actually put them into proper definitions. It tells that we have not properly assessed or thought about these things. So it's important to write, if you can, write the ways that you feel, and then you work from there. Another important way to heal from pain, to heal from a toxic relationship, is to find your strength. Finding your strength here, it just tells you that we are strong. Everyone has got strength. We are strong. The first level of strength stems from who you are or who you think you are. Now, a lot of us don't know who we are. I'm saying this is not about your name, what you do is different. It's about identity. Do you ever sit down to think about yourself and define yourself to yourself and believe what you defined yourself to be to yourself? I mean, it's really kind of a lot of words now, but it's true, because that's when you find essence. That's when you find that, oh, I am unique to the next person and I'm special. Do you even think you're special? And even if you think you're special, it's not about what you read from a motivational book. It's about what you think about yourself. Primarily, it's very important. And so when you're hurt, finding your strength begins from finding who you are. Asking yourself questions like, how could I have allowed someone to take advantage of me to this point, to the extent that I feel bad? How could I have been manipulated without realizing it? How could I have reacted these ways or in these ways? You see, the fact is, everyone has the strength to push buttons, to push our buttons, but no one tells you how to react to situations. So that's where you have your power. So you see that a lot of times when you get depressed from situations, it's not just about the situation because people have faced same situation but have not been depressed. So you're depressed, that depression that you feel is a reaction to the experience. That's what you can control. So if you become depressed from the toxic relationship, you have to understand that it's on you because you should have known better. You should have thought better, reacted better to it. So in healing from a toxic relationship, you must find yourself, find yourself and realize that you failed yourself by allowing what they said to get to you. It's at this point that you start to gather yourself back. If I think I'm strong, why was I weak? If I thought I had better reactions, why did I react in these ways? It can really be powerful and begin your healing process. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood by this point. I'm not saying you should go ahead to disprove the voice of the abuser in your life. They said you were nothing, and so you want to prove that you're something. They said you were too small, and so you want to prove that you're too big, or you're big, or big enough, or whatever that means. You have to be careful at this point to make sure that you're not defining yourself in opposition with what the abuser spoke to you or the words he spoke to you. Because most times we keep on fighting our battles in circles without realizing it. The abuser said you were nobody. And so right now you want to prove that you're somebody. Now, finding yourself is not trying to prove you're somebody because you cannot prove to yourself what you already are. The moment you try to prove to yourself, it means that you're trying to become something else. So, the abuser said you were nobody. All you're asking yourself now is, who am I? Am I truly a nobody? Why am I a nobody? Should I stay a nobody? That's what this conversation with self happens, no, and that's the value of the conversation with self. It's not a way to disprove the abuser. No. Let's assume that the voice of the abuser never existed. You're trying to find your feet here. You're trying to find yourself here, your identity, who you are. And sometimes we never think about this until we're drowning or we're in situations that are painful where we feel like we're regretful and we hate ourselves. That's when we ask ourselves these questions. But the fact is that we need to start to address these things before they become problems to us. But if you haven't, that's fine. If you're recovering from an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship, there is need to pause and ask yourself these questions. Who am I? What do I want? Was I hurt? Am I healing? What am I healing from? You see, because most abusive relationships and most toxic relationships were not always toxic. Sometimes they became toxic later on. Sometimes a little aspect of that relationship became toxic. It's not like it's everything. Just a small part of it was toxic. You see, so you need to identify what exactly you count as toxic and not just everything. You see, so that can begin your healing process, finding out who you really are, your identity. Having said that, before you start to heal from an abusive or toxic relationship, you have to separate yourself physically and emotionally from the toxic individual or relationship. You need to understand that another way to heal, or another step in the healing process, is leading with kindness. Now, most times when we're hurt, we feel annoyance, towards the individual or scenario where we were hurt. That's fine. But the thing is, try to understand as well where the hurt, oh, sorry, where the abuse or toxic behavior was coming from, which is very important. So sometimes people are deficient in character. That's the reason they are toxic, towards us. And so we have to understand that these are their problems. And so at that instance, I once said in the first episode that if you think individuals as mad, it can actually free you from the pain of a toxic relationship. If you see them as mad, as flawed, as intrinsically sick, that can begin your freedom sometimes, because a lot of times when we are hurt, we tend to want to understand why we were hurt, whether we deserved it. You see, that question should never come up in this instance while you're healing, because you can never truly understand why you were hurt. You can only change how you react to it. You don't know why they hurt you. It could have been your fault or their fault, but you don't exactly know. And healing is not about asking these questions like, why was I hurt? Because you don't have the answer to it. The right question here should be, how do I feel? And how can I break free from these feelings? The next step to healing is, I know we talked about finding yourself, identity. The next step is embracing yourself, embracing who you are. Now, people think sometimes embracing who you are is, I am what I am and who I am, and so I will stay this way forever. It's not the point. Embracing who you are sometimes means embracing who you want to become. Because we can't stay the same from time to time. It means there's no improvement. We need to change through time. And so if you're hurt, you were hurt for a reason that you can understand. I mean, from your own point of view, there is a reason you were hurt based on your reactions. You felt these ways for a reason, right? Now, you can actually change the way you are so you don't feel that way in the future. That's what I mean by embracing who you are. In this instance, or in this context, who you are here means who you should become, or who you have become by virtue of your healing process, or who you are becoming. You see, it really helps a lot when you embrace who you are, who you're becoming by the healing process. If you were hurt because of your failure to realize that people are different and some people want to just hurt you and walk away, at this point, while you're healing, you can actually point out that fact in your little write-up and say, oh, I was hurt because of this. And now I should begin to identify myself differently. So I'm now becoming someone who understands that people are different, that people are not always understanding, that people who give you what you don't deserve. These are points where there is real change. Many thanks to all those who have been listening so far. I hope these steps in the healing process helped you to understand how to heal from a toxic relationship. And I must say that it's difficult to. And if you have ever tried to, you can tell. But like I said, make your own steps and walk through your steps. And don't forget, practice, practice, practice. I believe that you will heal from your experience, your toxic experience. And if you have already, or you're healing and you want to share your experiences, please comment. And so other people can be helped. They can understand your perspective of what you went through. I must say that in all this, I don't want you to go through asking yourself questions like, did I deserve it? The word deserve in this instance doesn't exist, because who are you to say you deserved it or you're not? Because in their eyes, they deserved it. In the eyes of the abuser, you deserved the pain you got. But you don't think you deserved it. So it's always your word against theirs or theirs against yours. So you just have to focus on the healing process. And might I add here that you don't have to account to anybody how fast you're healing, because sometimes it can make you feel like, oh, I should be on the fast lane and heal faster from it. Else they would say They would say, they would call me names and say I'm not strong enough. I'm just, you have to heal at your own pace, and you don't have, it hasn't got to be a public affair. Your friends shouldn't know that you're actually healing from the process, you see. And if you have to be thrown into scenarios where you would have to backtrack on your healing, then maybe you should stay all by yourself during this process and heal adequately before you're able to interact like you used to. It's quite touchy for some people when they have to be thrown into the same scenarios while they're healing, because it just destroys all the efforts they've been making, and they just find themselves in the same toxic spot. To avoid that, all you have to do is to heal privately. Heal privately. And don't bother about accounting to anyone but yourself about your progress in the healing process. Now, this video is taking too long and I want to cut it down here, and just thank you for listening so far, and urge you to share with your friends and family, like and comment on this video, and let me know if you want me to talk about some other things that people are going through. I'm happy to share my experiences. I know that they're not the greatest, but they can be helpful. I believe that. All right, it's a wrap. Take care and bye for now.